Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Let me get started. I'm in my basement because it's 62 degrees instead of 82. So that's what we're doing in a new location. And feel free to ask questions, just write them down and I will get to them at any time. So don't worry about whenever you want to submit them if you have questions about the PRIMA program. Okay, hi, I'm Dr. Narda Robinson, founder and CEO of Curacor Vet and Curacor Med. Today we're going to talk about the PRIMA certification pathway. So PRIMA stands for the Pain, Rehabilitation, and Integrative Medicine Advantage. And that is our all-encompassing, just full, better way to practice program that you can get certified in. And we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about some of the needs of why veterinary medicine needs to incorporate this because drugs and surgery just aren't cutting it. So again, what is PRIMA? We just talked about that, but it's also a care package for better veterinary medicine. So why PRIMA? The things that we do as we incorporate scientifically based integrative medicine and rehabilitation into our kind of tried and true practices, but ones that we really need and not just are doing because that's what we were taught in school, then we will practice better medicine. Then we are better veterinarians. And in this way, we can bring the veterinary profession up to date and avoid becoming irrelevant because there are so many other healthcare professionals that want to do what we do, but aren't really that interested in getting into vet school and doing that work. And, if they can take a side route down and become a human acupuncturist, and if their state isn't watching, then they can just go ahead and practice on animals or just do some little surgical carving out of the scope of practice of veterinary medicine and human acupuncture or physical therapy or whatever. Just start changing laws to allow them to legally practice on animals. And so we see this all across the country. I've been dealing with it for 20 years when working with CSU, Colorado State University, and the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association and representing them and going down to the state house and talking to the Department of Regulatory agencies. So it's kind of like climate change and a lot of other things. It's just going to be continuing to happen. So we're going to get eroded more and more. And it's not a bad thing to fight it, but it's also like, why is this happening? Well, people want options, people want some better options, and they don't just want a 5-minute quick appointment with a vet that may or may not touch their animal and just offer them drugs and surgery and things that are expensive at the same time. So with PRIMA, we embrace what is still relevant and useful and not overly invasive, but we can infuse it with scientifically based integrative medicine as first line care. So sometimes with holistic integrative kinds of things, like, so not the scientific approach, but with the with as I use the term holistic, what I noticed both in human and veterinary holistic medicine. So I really don't want to go back to that kind of word, and it's missing the W anyway, because we're not really practicing with wholes that much. Um, anyway, here you see arnica, and I mean, I love these old bottles. I love collecting pharmaceuticals like this, but they're more as relics. It's like if I talk about traditional Chinese medicine, it's a relic. And that's where it belongs, is in history, and we can learn from it. But we don't have to go back and dig out things from the 1800s and say that they're valid and that they should be done today. And that's where the scientific piece comes in. So obviously there were things that were done back then, and there were things that are done now that should not be still practiced because we know better. But there are still practices like the TPLO, which we've covered in another webinar, and I have a rap song on it, but you don't need to go to YouTube and watch that. Probably don't. So, but it's out there if you feel like watching it. But diseases of despair comes into it as well. So these things that we deal with, the human equation, whether it's from the veterinary practitioner, your support staff, or your clients, that there is a lot of despair around right now. And so that permeates into the veterinary profession as well, which we don't want to do. And you don't need to do that. But here are some of the factors why a veterinarian may feel despair and acquire diseases thereof. Worsening of economic inequality. We're dealing with a lot of conversation about that currently with what's going on in the nation. Feelings of hopelessness about personal financial success. We see that in veterinarians and veterinary students, where just that thing about both COVID-19 and school debt coming together and putting veterinarians on the top of the list of risk of mental breakdown because of these compilations of factors. And I may be biased, but I have a lot of other people in this community that are biased because we've seen the value of practicing scientific integrative medicine, pain medicine, and rehabilitation. And you can be happy and you can be in charge of your own destiny. So you don't need to be beholden to a corporation thinking that you won't be able to pay your school debt. You just need to have some ingenuity and some entrepreneurial spirit, maybe get together with some other folks of like mind and build your own little practice. You don't need to do surgery. You don't need to have big anesthesia units and surgical suites and radiology centers. So that brings the overhead like to 20% of what it otherwise would. But anyway, when we think about our clients, people feel disadvantaged and inadequate when, you might say to them as a veterinarian, oh, this would be great to do. Hopefully you're not doing this, but you need a TPLO for your dog, or your dog needs back surgery. And think of the stress there is when, and this does happen, even though surgeons like to deny it, that it's like if you don't do this, then there's no hope and you might as well euthanize today. So it's really just unmanageable in that way. And so even before this whole COVID development, I'd say that veterinary medicine, before it just went down, as things were going on, it's like it was just spiraling out of control. The costs were spiraling out of control. Too many surgeries, too much, corporate like pressure, charge. And we still hear that today. And so for those veterinarians that are graduates of my program that are still working for corporations, maybe not 100%, but a high likelihood, they are, feeling the pressure of referring for surgery and diminishing the time they spend with their animals. So you really have to think, is this what you want for the rest of your life? So all these things come together and affect you, affect your clients. What are the diseases of despair in the veterinary population? So how are they affected? They are certainly affected, and I think it's several orders of magnitude what they experience based on what their person, what other animals in the household, what's going on in the community. If you have flashbangs and tear gas outside, that is going to increase a lot of stress. And we just covered stress last week, and we've covered the TPLO and all this. So I just feel like it is time for a better type of medicine, and let's rethink what we're doing and not just perpetuate these practices that we may have learned in school. And having taught for 20 years in an academic institution, I know that there's pressure to publish. I know that there's pressure to get grants and funding. And if your source of funding, for example, was a drug company or a surgical device company, and you have to do that so you can maintain your position in your school, then how do you think most people are going to do that? Because there is underfunding of higher ed by and large. And so we have a lot of corporate influence, and that has to be recognized. So if the instructors are just, it was astounding to me, really, to start teaching 20 something years ago at this institution. And nobody tells you how to teach. Nobody tells you how to write exam questions. You're just kind of like, okay, this is what happened to me. I've been in school much of my life, so I've taken a lot of these tests and I'll just write something down. You don't have a teaching degree, and yet you are an assistant, associate, full professor, tenured professor, and you're getting all kinds of funding from various sources. So, and you're not necessarily, you aren't a product of an institution that completely pushed, critical thinking and was probably mentioning the value of integrative medicine and rehabilitation. So, I know that there's this attitude that when you get into school, like this is the lofty instructor in front of you. So they must be saying what's true, what I should do, and what's standard of care. But then if you dig deeper at some point in your life, you might realize standard of care is just what the other people around you are practicing. So that will vary quite a bit. And even with spinal cord injury and the treatment thereof, it is very different what you learn at one institution from another. There aren't common approaches and ways that you would say, oh, I'm going to do surgery right away. I'm going to get scrubbed into surgery as soon as we know there's a dachshund that's not using his or her legs well. We're going to get right in there and be all heroic, or what? I mean, it's completely variable. And maybe there's some art of medicine there, or maybe there's just bias. And you land at the vet school that you are grateful to get in, and then you're like, well, so and so was the god of neuro at my institution, and he or she said this or that, and you're going to believe that the rest of your life, and then so you're going to practice. So there's just so much missing in school. So I felt I had to start a new one. So that's why we have CuraCore Academy, and why we are teaching monthly courses, and why we have the Prima certification. So the diseases of despair, though, from a One Health perspective, with me being both an osteopathic physician and a veterinarian, it's inseparable. And animals just absorb so much from us and are around us, and they're concerned about us. And so, how do we affect each other, whether it's at a heart level, a psyche level, just an environmental, a social, whatever TV that's blaring all day long, and everything. So we have a One Health system going on here, and how can we ourselves be more healthful and healthy practitioners, and how can we impart to that way of life and those standards and values through the way that we practice, and give that model of health to our clients that are interested in that. I know when I first started as a physician in practice, and I could offer them non-drug approaches, there were some people that just wanted a shot. But most notably, um, the guys with erectile dysfunction just wanted a shot of testosterone. And so, don't tell me about the psychological things. Don't tell me about anything. It's like, well, I know that the physician that I'm covering for would give this to you, but I am not going to. And so then the battles began. But anyway, so drugs are not the answer. Surgery is not the answer. And even if you loved all the drugs that you used, you are unwilling to give them up, or carve out any space for anything integrative, which I know is not the case with our current audience here. But there are now drug shortages. So a drug shortage is from the FDA website. Drug shortage may involve either an actual or a potential shortage of a drug product. When drug shortages involve medically necessary veterinary products, it's the FDA's policy to help prevent or alleviate them. And so they work with drug manufacturers, and there's a certain amount of intimacy there between the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies, and when necessary, other countries, to find ways to resolve shortages. Because in this mindset of medicine currently, what is there? There's just drugs. If you're a doctor, human or veterinary, what is there? There's drugs. If you do dentistry, yeah, there's some tools or surgery or whatever, but drugs are most of what's going on. And so medically necessary veterinary product used to treat or prevent a serious animal disease or condition need to assure the safety of food products, and that there is no alternative drug substitute. Well, for a lot of these things, there are alternative substitutes, but they may not be pharmaceuticals. But so, I mean, this has become such a big thing for so long. And it's like, well, if you knew how to do pain medicine, rehabilitation, and integrative medicine from a scientific standpoint, you could have a lot of other options available. So keep all the drugs that you love if you love them, but also, wouldn't it be great to have tools that you can also use, and may find that in many cases that they are working better and they don't have the side effects. So many reasons for animal drug shortages exist. unavailable raw materials, unavailable packaging materials, marketing decisions by manufacturers like, oh, that wasn't making us enough money. Yes, we bought this other company, we absorbed them, we fired a bunch of people, and we're going to cut that line because we don't care about it, or we don't care about the veterinary piece, or whatever. And then maybe there was an FDA enforcement issue. So, they have things about, well, what can you do if you don't have your drugs? Oh, no. So they don't have acupuncture here. They don't have photomedicine. But, it's clear that human drugs are shortaging as well. So, it's like, should you just be prepared and have other things that you can use and maybe not be as familiar with? Do you know all of the negative side effects of the drugs that you're using or prepared to substitute with? Probably not. And I'm not sure how much time you're allotting to describe the list of side effects and interactions when you prescribe a certain medication. So, this is from a site, wedgwoodpharmacy.com. I have the link down below. My colleagues and referring veterinarians trying to treat their patients with certain medications are upset. When I speak with them, they ask me questions about these medications like, what happened to blank? Where do I get blank? What do you use to treat blank? There are severe and numerous medication shortages right now that appear to be inexplicable, frequent, and irritating. This blog continues. To make matters worse, I recently received a message from a drug manufacturer announcing another round of what can only be described as breathtaking price increases for a long list of items. I mean, think about the EpiPen injection things. I would rather die than stick myself with an EpiPen. But anyway, and once that was sold to another company, how many times they increased the price? I mean, it was already like $500 or $600. By the way, it's been recently sort of recalled because of some sediment, I believe. But anyway, the price changes were effective immediately, and they even asked me to help communicate this to my clients so that they would be aware of the new pricing and not be shocked when the order arrives. The price increases on individual items ranged from an 11% increase to a 963% increase. So when we think about the depths of despair of veterinary medicine and the diseases you may acquire therefrom from practicing in that field, of a limited, narrow, drugs and surgery mentality, yeah, that's going to incite some unhappiness in terms of clients and that aggravation. I mean, I recently spoke to one of our graduates who said he gets threatened every day that he works for this corporation and that they don't want him doing pain medications and pain consults, and he spent all this time to learn it and that's what he loves. But they're putting on even more pressure now with this COVID-19 thing, and where people are like out of jobs. And here from the Wedgwood Pharmacy blog, it continues. The nation is facing unprecedented drug shortages from cancer treatments, surgical sedatives. Bring your cat in for a dental. What are they going to use for medications for, pre-anesthetics and, pain and this and that? Intravenous medications, even saline. Remember the thing with Puerto Rico, and they didn't have bags of saline because of the disaster down there. Many emergency rooms remedies, the pharmaceutical supply chain is under duress. Industry consolidation, manufacturing problems, and economic strain have strangled the pipeline that supplies medications for hospitals, physicians, and veterinarians. The shortages are more frequent and more prolonged. So again, even if you love every drug that you prescribe, there are needs to know something else. And then you'll find, oh, I love this. And you'll switch your practice entirely to that. Many of the shortages are generic drugs. There are fewer manufacturers, so consolidation, making things overseas. We've seen a lot with that, with acquiring the personal protective equipment and how hard that was. So, there are problems that are widespread and interlaced. And maybe now that there's been so much consciousness raising about it through all this hardship since about January or November, that we can start to do something about it. Any breakdown in manufacturing or shortage of raw materials can cause a widespread medication shortage, and the FDA can't force the manufacturers to make more drugs, blah, 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 but we can approve generic drugs with less oversight if you'd like, and that's what's been done as well, and that's where you have problems and you have poor quality. Here, for example, super potent thyroid drug. Now, some of you might like that idea, but if you were giving this to one of your patients or taking it yourself, and This was just in May 22nd, 2020. This was, a couple weeks ago. Highly potent. Like there's too much stuff in there of the active thyroid product. Here, it's not just pharmaceuticals. So even if we are loving the cannabis and prescribing that, and that's fine, but there should be regulation there and there should be enforcement. But where is everybody? They went away. Here, for example, this was startling. I believe this is an Australian company, but this was from the FDA. And this is cannabidiol complex, curcumin complex, and cannabidiol plus curcumin injectables. Who ever heard of that? How are you going? Well, you're injecting this. Okay, so well, the FDA has been putting out a lot of cannabis letters lately, even though they are severely strapped in their staffing. But I think that's probably a good thing that they have found this, and they're like, yeah, this is unapproved drugs. You're injecting this into the bloodstream or sub-Q or however you're doing it. Not very good. And as they say, unapproved new drugs injected into the bloodstream for which safety and efficacy have not been established could pose a serious risk of harm to users because they bypass many of the body's natural defenses against toxins or dangerous organisms that can lead to serious and life-threatening conditions such as septicemia or sepsis. So that's good that that was found out. And here's a self-reported, like, oopsie, we have too much lead in our CBD oil, our watermelon flavored CBD oil. So good that they fessed up with that. But when we talk about cannabis and, on site or with online courses or in another online thing, that trying to get an unfixed, so like an unbribed or unbribed certificate of analysis that is accurate and complete would be good to have. And just a note, because we have an upcoming botanical on site course that you just have to have this discernment and discretion. And yet, while it has been so high for cannabis, and a lot of people know COA, it's like, oh, but I get master so and so special mixture, and I'm a certified traditional Chinese herbal practitioner, veterinarian. Yet my master tells me that this thing is good, but he or she won't say how much of the dangerous products there are in there, but I just have to trust. And that's how things are done in Chinese medicine. So it's just this uneven playing field of cannabis. We must have 6 different certificates of safety and all this stuff versus, oh, it's a pretty little bottle with nice Chinese writing and flowers on it. So it'll be fine. Anyway, so we don't do that with the Prima course. We do not support secret ingredients. But anyway, so clients are sometimes aware of these things, sometimes aren't. If you're not signed up for FDA alerts for drug recalls and warnings, that's not good. So you should be, because I know I've posted some things and people even had that lot of that problematic drug with crazy levels of toxic ingredients or just, problems that you should be aware of. If you have a pharmacy, you should know this. Or pet food recalls and all that. So here, now a lot of people, so this is an issue because with flea and tick products, you got your herbal things that can cause abortion and kill a living baby out of your uterus too, even with some tea from the pennyroyal family. So that's an herbal thing. We want to always think about that. But it also is used for flea products, even topically, and yet can kill a dog, just even topical transdermal things. So we need to know that as well. So we're going to practice botanical medicine, but from a very safe and informed perspective, and only dispense or recommend or consult about what's useful and right. But clients are rightly concerned, or they should be, I think, about adverse events associated with certain flea and tick products. Even putting it on, when I read it, when somebody recommended it once and I was looking at the package, because I do not prescribe this, it's like, oh wow, that can be bad for both my animal and me, and you can't take it back. I mean, with an acupuncture needle, as long as you haven't penetrated the brain or the spinal cord or some major vessel or organ, you take it back and things will recover if the animal is somehow like analgesied or something in a certain area, or has a proprioceptive thing because you've you've just knocked out their sensory awareness from them probably laying too long on their sciatic nerve. So that stuff turns around. And that's why, because I hate if I would ever cause a problem for an animal or a person. But with drugs, you can't take that back. And for herbs as well, and many drugs, you don't have a reversal agent. So you're kind of stuck, and that would just do me in if I knew that. But thinking of that and thinking how seizures are one of some of the issues with these neurologic adverse events. When you are treating seizure disorders in an animal, what is your differential? Do you just immediately go to, oh, it's idiopathic? Or do you think, what are they eating? Is it contaminated? What kinds of drugs? Full list of drugs, supplements, everything. What are you doing? What's in the home? Rule out all the toxins instead of just saying, oh, here's some CBD stuff. It's supposed to be good for seizures, or here's one, two, three, and or four different drugs that we're going to put your animal on and work them out for the rest of their lives because we don't want to use the cannabis. So with anything, we need to be better diagnosticians, and that's part of the Prima program is spending more time doing a better diagnosis, thinking about the differentials, considering the whole patient and not just the disease, and so on within the context of a cat friendly if you see cats, or fear free, well, always fear free, but very humanistic and fun to be in. But here for these flea and tick products, yeah, I mean, vets and clients need this information that there is a potential for neurologic injury. So what happens is the FDA will give an approval to a drug, but still want to collect information, whatever information, little bits seeps in, never mind all the things that never get reported. So topical solutions for cats and dogs, tablets or whatever, have experienced adverse effects such as muscle tremors, ataxia, and seizures. So these are real concerns. And no wonder if a client would hear about it, and I actually support clients going on Google and the whole, I'm not an anti-Dr. Google thing. It's like, be informed. We go on Google, we do our research, but you got to have enough time to talk to them about what they found and what's real and what's not. So another one, maybe you can't live without doing flea and tick products and all that stuff, but I wish you could, but at least know what's going on and alert the people to that. Maybe they're willing to take the risk. But before, if that animal develops seizures, let's see, okay, now what do we do? Oh, and here's another recall. A voluntary nationwide recall of amitriptyline, an antidepressant, and phenobarbital due to a potential label mix-up. Oh, you wanted phenobarbital? Oh, sorry, that had amitriptyline in it. If mislabeled, inadvertent exposure to or overdose of phenobarbital could cause severe intoxication and even death in humans and animals. Who's footing the bill and the dealing with the court cases on this, or what's going on? I mean, how many of these have happened before you realized you were giving phenobarb to depressed people? If mislabeled, inadvertent exposure to amitriptyline could cause uneven heartbeats, extreme drowsiness, hallucinations, fainting in animals and humans. Like, before you do the $3,000 workup of why that animal is fainting, how would you even know that one drug that they were on was actually a counterfeit drug or infiltrated with all kinds of other things, or just a little label switch up? So again, what I'm doing here is trying to point out just the problems, even with regular drugs that you might love and never want to get rid of, that the rug is being pulled out from under you. And it's then, if from the quality standpoint, from the disclosure standpoint, from the regulatory standpoint. And you need to have other options, I think. And these other options are remarkably nicer in so many ways and still effective, yet we don't have these big pharma dollars pushing them out there in terms of the awareness. And so you get taught this in school, you get reinforced for it at once upon a time we had veterinary meetings, and you would see all the drug companies and all the paraphernalia and all the cute little things they give you. So we need to think for ourselves and carve out a new type of practice of veterinary medicine, and that's what we're doing here in Fort Collins with Curacor Academy. here from last year, July 2019, FDA enforcement actions plummet under Trump. So this is from Science Magazine. And so this is the regulatory aspect. From monitoring clinical trials and approving medicines and vaccines to ensuring the safety of blood transfusions, kind of important, medical devices, groceries, and more, the US FDA is one of the nation's most vital watchdogs. By several measures, however, FDA's compliance and enforcement actions have plummeted since President Trump took office, science has found. The agency's warning letters, a key tool for keeping dangerous or ineffective drugs and devices and tainted foods off the market, have fallen by 1/3. For example, compared with the start of the Obama presidency, Trump-era letters have dropped by nearly half. And it goes on. These are just a couple excerpts. So what you thought and hoped would be the same is just, not, there's no watchdog there, or there are maybe things for some products and not for others. And then how much of that ingredient list is coming from Asia, where there are a lot of questions there. So, Prima, set yourself free from being limited to drugs and surgery. You still have those options, but what if we walk away and do something a little bit differently? Leaving behind the high pressure medical practice, like, why would you want to do that anyway? And we have a question. What would I recommend for flea, tick, heartworm, and parasite infestations in the face of all this? Well, that's why. So, thank you for that question. I mean, that's why that one is a tough problem, but I really don't like the transdermal approach. But that isn't my area of practice. Thank you. And we don't live in an area where there are a lot of fleas. That is a tough one. I mean, heartworm, I think certainly those drugs aren't as much of an issue, but the ones that cause neurologic diseases are a problem, and I don't necessarily have a good alternative because that's just not somewhere that I've looked into. I don't want people rubbing pennyroyal on them. So I agree, that's a tough one, but let's look at all the options that there are and choose the less bad ones, I would say. And then, I mean, there are things you can do topically from an herbal perspective, and I know some people rub garlic on their animal, or put eucalyptus leaves around the house. And if you can do avoidance, that would be great. Or if you can just do a lot of good monitoring, that is good too. But so it's definitely a tough one. That's probably the toughest one, I think, to get around, just because, again, with climate change, there are more ticks than there used to be in places that there didn't used to be. So if anybody is watching that wants to email me some suggestions, I have my email address at the end. But that's a good question. But there are certainly all kinds of other diseases for which Prima pain rehab and integrated medicine does have good options, from neurologic causes of other issues, and we have seizures that are just idiopathic or maybe brain injury caused. We have KCS. This is what we're doing with the segments, The Untold Story, which is going to be once a month. In these webinars, I'm going to cover a certain disease process. And at the end of June, we have seizure disorders. And that's where we will be covering what the etiopathogenesis is of a given condition. So seizure, which is a big thing, and what are the conventional approaches and what are the more Prima approaches, so that the students that are watching and the practitioners that are out there like yourself, that we can show what's the comparison in terms of risks and benefits and effectiveness for veterinary species, and so that we can broaden that field and take away that tunnel vision in terms of what's the cause, and look at this expanded repertoire that we have to treat without just being dismally limited. So anyways, moving on, do you want to continue to rush through exams in order to meet quotas the rest of your life? So again, making choices, calling for a timeout, and getting away from that high pressure medical practice. So if you haven't already, we do have the 10 steps to Prima practice, and it covers a lot of these things and reinforces it for us. And so you can go to this at the website, curacore.org/vet/10 steps. And it just outlines why and where we do Prima. But the first 5 are about restoring medicine's art and soul and getting back to that vision that we had when we entered veterinary medicine, at least many of us did, about what it is to be a healer of animals and to take that family, into your care and to do the best thing you can for their beloved, dog, cat, horse, whatever. And so we need that time to do a thorough history, to ask questions, to say, okay, when did this start? What happened? To the best of your ability, because the animals aren't necessarily going to be good historians, that what was the timeline? What makes it better? What makes it worse? What have you tried? What are you interested in? What are your goals? And so on. Reviving the lost art of the physical examination. And let's see where my webcam. There we go. Oh yeah. Okay. Because I want to see, because I have a little friend here. So the lost art of the physical examination. Hello. So doing a palpation exam, starting from the nose, going to the tail, going from the top line to the little toes, and to the degree that they will let you, and be happy with that. But the physical examination, now we'll talk later about anorexia or low appetite. And especially, with cats, where yes, it's important that they continue to eat, but what is the problem? And so, again, if you've been through my acupuncture class, you know that in our private Facebook group for graduates, that if you say what are good points for stimulating appetite, it's like, oh boy, I'm gonna have a reaction, because you should be finding out what is the source of the inappetence, especially in a cat, because they have a lot of things and you might have just spoken to them not nicely that day. And so we have to be better at the exam, and that's where the physical examination includes the myofascial palpation, and that is absolutely critical. So recognizing integrative medicine as first line care, and that's acupuncture, it's medical massage, it's photomedicine, it is botanical medicine appropriately chosen, and rehabilitation or therapeutic exercise, just movement kinds of things. And then, as I said earlier, creating a bond centered practice, and within the context of fear cat friendly and fear free, not cat free and fear friendly. Anyways, you know what I mean. So, as Sir William Osler, the father of modern medicine, said, the good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. And so, I know with human medical school that it, it was increasingly frowned upon to say, oh, the, you know, kidney failure in room 116 or whatever. It was, especially being an osteopathic physician, that was just not done. So anyway, so when we get to the pain rehab and integrative medicine advantage here, Prima, then what is that about? So in our review of what's out there, I mean, you really need it all. We have most people that will start with the medical acupuncture course, and that's the important foundation, because it covers so many of the osteopathic medical dimensions that I have brought to this work. And based on, if you're not familiar with osteopathic medicine, that the body has intrinsic self-healing practices and processes and intrinsic abilities. And what our job as the caregiver for them from a medical perspective is to accentuate the ability of those intrinsic capacities to work. And that's what we're doing with acupuncture, and also with medical massage, and also with light medicine, the photomedicine, and also with movement, and to a degree with botanical medicine, but that's on the verge of pharmacology. So we're really adding something in which has more concerns than working with the endogenous pharmacopoeia that we spoke about last webinar. But anyway, so the Prima certification is this 5-part or 5 kind of realm component, and this is on the website, so you'll be able to see that. But these are the courses that are involved in that, because as you bring this as a new way of practice, where we can also bring in from pharmaceuticals, we can also bring in from surgery, but to make this first line care, you need acupuncture, but you also need massage, even a 5-minute massage for somebody that's in hospital. Maybe they've just had a dental and their neck is all tight. Whatever it is, massage, which we're teaching this weekend, is a really crucial part of it. And then with the myofascial palpation, as I've said, botanical medicine consulting, it doesn't mean that you have to prescribe herbs or adopt them, but people will have questions, and there are a bunch of nice options out there. And especially with cannabis, we can be discerning and we can make some good differences, especially for spinal cord injury patients. Photomedicine, integrative rehab, orthopedics, neurologic, and then case studies. So that's our basic certification pathway for vets. So, it's our way to offset all these things where approximately 1 in 11 vets have serious psychological distress. 1 out of 6 is experiencing suicidal ideation since leaving vet school. So we can do better. We can change this. We can offset these demands of practice as we've gone through before in other webinars, and ways to just give you ideas on how to be independent and make your own decisions and practice medicine at a level that you feel it is the only right way to practice. And we can do it for pretty much everything. For example, we talk a lot about intervertebral disc disease in our acupuncture and other courses. And then we had that webinar recently on the TPLO and the tragic TPLO in canine cruciate ligament disease, but then also seizure disorders. As I said, is it a toxin? How are we going to address it? And so we'll be talking about that as our first untold story later this month. But so what can be done? These are the 5 pillars, as we say, of Prima. And you see that there are overlapping mechanisms with medical acupuncture, photomedicine, botanical medicine in terms of neuroprotection, anti-inflammatory effects, analgesic effects, and so on. So they work together, but each one has its own value. So what I might want to do with acupuncture might not be complete for tissue repair or as great as I want it to be, or stimulating to those mitochondria and the recovery and the cell division and the tissue repair as with photomedicine. So we like to use them all, and it's really hard to choose. So we don't. Aren't drugs and surgery sufficient? No. Why? Spinal cord injury, for example, here's a big missing piece right there. Even speaking about dogs and the hemilaminectomy, surgery can cause clinically significant spinal instability, especially when you're like, oh, well, this other level, yeah, it's a little bit narrow. Why don't we take it off? Take that lamina off and open that space up some more. It's like when you're doing that, you are disrupting the structural integrity of the spine. Not only that, but you're going in and you're mucking around with the proprioceptive nerves and the security of the muscles and the fascia around there, and you're destabilizing it. And so, according to one study, even after surgery, this was abductions, the rate of recurrence of neurologic signs and consequent euthanasia nears 50%. So they just don't want to do that anymore and may even regret having done it in the first place. So what if those deaths are preventable? What if we can maybe not even do surgery, which so many of our graduates are finding that the spinal cord is really capable of recovering when you assist it with the acupuncture and the laser therapy and get them moving and do the whole thing. So comparative complications of spinal cord injury from human to dog mean many of the same things, but it's so multidisciplinary. So when you have surgery, you're not addressing the cardiac or abdominal complications in terms of the need for maybe if you thought that there was opioids or other drugs needed and they created sluggish digestion and oh no, now what do? We do a promotility agent. No, I mean, just cut all that stuff back, use only what's necessary and when necessary. And when you have acupuncture and massage and laser available to you and you know how to use it, you can address so many of these things and not be just having them stuck in a cage, which we don't want them to do, and losing their ability to move and to stand well and so on. So this is a webinar in itself, but supporting this shift from cut to cure to protect to cure. So not that you have to be scrubbing in as soon as you know adduction is on the way, but instead, how can we do neuroprotection from a multimodal fashion and protect any further damage. Because what's surgery doing besides going in there and you're disrupting the back and all that supportive joint integrity for the back, and then you're going to maybe take out a teeny little piece of disc. We don't always know how much is in there, but you've certainly done a lot of damage in there. And that just accounts for that, if it was actually there, a primary cause of the spinal cord injury. It does not address the secondary causes of spinal cord injury, which are what precipitate the long-term just debility. And it's the secondary pathophysiology of spinal cord injury where Prima shines. We're cutting down on the pain in terms of using scientific integrative medicine, acupuncture, laser therapy, and so on are working. It doesn't mean we don't ever do surgery, but surgery is needed for just select cases. So changing the order of things and introducing pain medicine and rehabilitation integrative care as first line options that you tell people about, you give them this information. And from a scientific practitioner standpoint, we're matching the mechanisms of injury. So like I said, with spinal cord injury, there are circulatory changes. Initially, there's going to be circulatory shock, but in the long term, there's going to be reduced circulation. There are a lot of inflammatory mediators, of course, so reactive oxygen species. There's, as you go on, there's potentially a glial scar that's coming up, and so can laser avoid that? And how can we stimulate those neurons to regrow and meet each other? And then we need that functional recovery, which is what acupuncture would be great for, where you're stimulating the nerves, and with the working on the hardware more, the therapeutic exercise, we're recovering movement. So hooking back up the brain, the spinal cord, the peripheral nerves, and the muscles to make things happen again. We have so many options to do that. So we match the mechanisms of injury to the mechanisms of healing. And, back, how many years is this now? Almost 20 years ago, knowing that acupuncture shows promise in the treatment of spinal cord injury for all kinds of conditions, the comorbidities that go along with disc disease and spinal cord injury, that acupuncture is useful for. And then we had a spate of electroacupuncture studies back in the 2000s up to 2010 for disc disease in dogs. And then, of course, massage. When would you not need massage? So this should be part and parcel of what a tech can do and what the vets can do. And it doesn't need to be a full body spa massage, but can just be something like, hey, how are you doing? Let's see what's going on. And just approaching your patients with this very gentle, very supportive kind of healing touch. Photomedicine, from light emitting diodes to laser therapy, cross species, integrating it. If we're talking about spinal cord injury, getting them up and moving faster, clinically proven at the University of Florida. This was a Thor laser, and they did this. They did it after surgery, but they found that animals could go home so much more quickly, and they did better. I'm sure they were less painful, and they were walking sooner. Why is this not standard of care? And so this little guy, he would have been euthanized. Charlie came to see me and would have been euthanized if his dad didn't insist on getting acupuncture, like so many of the others back in the day. And so I said, you need to get over to not only me, but I wanted them to get over and go to the rehab clinic, who would, at the time, I was starting to see more human patients. So they took over the care of Charlie and did laser therapy, as you can see here. And they had the underwater treadmill. And here's the Cavalettis. And here he's spinal walking to some degree. Nobody knows how much, but he's moving. He's not stuck in a cage for 8 weeks. And his dad and his mom, they lived in Wyoming, and they would bring him down for the day, and he'd have a little therapy, then he'd rest. And he was just really happy with what he was doing, and he wasn't dead. If he hadn't had a dad that insisted on acupuncture, he would have been dead, because the surgery resident could not find deep pain on this dog and had already told them he has something horrible going on, and it could be ascending descending myelomalacia. And if you really want to have surgery, we'll send you over, and we'll you can talk to Narda and everything. It's like I used my acupuncture needle at one of the Bafeng points on the back, and Charlie looked over. And it's like, you've been crushing this dog's toes with hemostats and he hasn't reacted. But I've used an acupuncture needle, so a different type of provocation. But and he sees something there. And his parents were so just overwhelmed because they had just lost their other dog and they couldn't bear to put down another dog. And and this guy recovered and he was walking. We'll show you that soon. But so here's another question. Can you speak to why chiropractic care, aha, is not included in Prima? I know some of why you don't love it, but I bet people are curious. Great, great question. Thank you. And indeed, I am going to be doing a webinar working on the title. I think it's either questioning chiropractic or questionable chiropractic, and it's really both. But yeah, I would love to speak about chiropractic. Let me take a drink first. So as an osteopathic physician, I learned how to crack necks and back, boom, boom. Um, and I don't know what chiropractors do now in the days now, but back decades ago when I was in osteopathic school, what the chiropractors would do, they'd take your neck to all the way from one end and go wham, and then go wham. And my mother had chiropractic one time, and it was really a horrible experience. And the chiropractor's yelling at you like, relax, relax, and they screw your neck up. But also, besides that, and so with the osteopathic approach, which when I was a sophomore in medical school, I get really waylaid on this topic, so I'll try to keep it short. But anyway, when I heard that the chiropractors had shown evidence of causing strokes with chiropractic and high velocity cervical thrusting, it's like, man, I'm not carrying that on my conscience. So I lost interest in it and I just never did it a lot. I mean, I could do it. So you would just localize it right to that point and go, and, with the two hands on a human and doing that. But the thing is, I mean, aside from the risk and the way that an osteopath does is there have been no cases of osteopathic physicians causing stroke from upper cervical manipulation and thrusting. But I know people that had strokes from chiropractic. I mean, it's got a higher incidence than has been reported, of course. And then so you're taking those concepts and you're applying it to the non-human structure when there is no evidence. There are no papers on chiropractic for cats or dogs. There are some preliminary things for horses, but it's just not there. And then people can't talk about the mechanism. So I'm gonna have to truncate that there. But I love that question, and I will be doing a full webinar on it. But yeah, with disc disease, like somebody like Charlie, I mean, you have a clear risk of making this worse. And then what's going to happen? No, you're not going to take Charlie to some big medical center. Like with the human thing, you have neurosurgery fellows and all this stuff, and they're the ones that write the papers because they're the ones seeing the stroke patients from chiropractic. But you go to your vet, it's like, oh no, must have gotten worse, or we're just, anyways, I'm going to stop there. But that's a really great question, so thank you for asking that. But yeah, that's why we can do soft tissue. Like, how do bones get out of place anyway? Oh, the bone, what, it traveled here and you got to go like that? No, the muscles tend to get you restricted. And so it's really about treating the muscles and relaxing the myofascia. So we can do that with acupuncture, laser, and getting them up, getting them out, not sticking them in a box for weeks and weeks and having everybody have mental illness on top of whatever pre-existing problem they had. And this is Charlie, and he's increasingly better, and he's not dead. So he's in the middle of his therapy there. So integrative medicine and rehabilitation elevate the standard of care and do save lives, and I've saved a bunch of lives, and so have the practitioners in our community. And so it's not just acupuncture, it's everything. And it's not using qi and herbs and herbs that are strychnine or undisclosed amounts. It's doing rational pharmacological approaches. But if we do nothing, nothing will change. So that's why we're doing something, and we're offering this PRIMA certification so that we have a standard of care that the consumer, the client, can know if that person is PRIMA certified, then they have been through, a rigorous curriculum, and they're scientifically based, and they have that flexibility that they can provide multimodal interventions. And it's not just acupuncture, not just massage, but you need that flexibility to be able to address all the problems that we're addressing with this new PRIMA pathway. So no wonder you get burnt out if you can't have that flexibility. So I know we need to wrap this up pretty soon, but just being honest about surgical risks, and we covered the TPLO and Nico, who was never the same, and whose mom, who was a vet, had an $18,000 bill with a biofilm and resistant staph that needed amikacin injections, and just a horrible experience. This is it 1 year later. So giving people options, having clients and not surprising them with huge bills, and giving them opportunities for healing that will not crush them or their bank account or their animal. So yeah, and oh, by the way, not causing cancer at the same time. So review the TPLO webinar if you're not familiar with that. But with cat practice as well, we talked about anorexia, constipation, inflammatory bowel disease, and especially for them, using a bucket full of drugs is not good. We talked about anorexia, and we're kind of near the end here. But if if you want to say the cat's not eating, is it dental disease? Is there nasal stuffiness? Is there any kind of pain? Is there a dog barking somewhere? Is it not the preferred kitty's food? Is it, what is it? And is it leading to constipation? So does it have enough moisture? So many things. So that could be a webinar in itself. And then constipation. It should not be a big deal, but why are people learning to prescribe cisapride for this? When that's off the market. So constipation, great thing to do from a PRIMA perspective, finding out where there's back tension, because there's going to be back tension, and working along the groove here, this lumbar gully that I talk about, because the intestines are in there. And if you did this to yourself, we had a webinar on that, but right in through here, this is where you can apply some mechanical pressure to the intestines, and that's going to help facilitate movement. We can do acupuncture for GI motility. We can change the diet. We can do some laser in here. We definitely want to have fluids. We can, there's a bunch of herbs for GI conditions as well. So it's so much fun to treat these, and you're not fighting with things. You're not giving cisapride, which has become illegal other than compounded. And so being used to stimulate motility, we love stimulating motility with PRIMA practices, including exercise, including movement, not to give some kind of drug that has been responsible for serious cardiac arrhythmias, including VTAC, VFib, torsade de pointe, and QT prolongation. I mean, what are we doing here? And then which drugs do you know that are going to inhibit or induce the cytochrome P450, 3A4 enzymes? That's the most common family of enzymes. But I think, based on when I lecture about herbs in herbs, veterinary medicine or human medicine, people just aren't aware of the different families of cytochrome P450 enzymes or the P-glycoprotein pathways. So there's so much more to learn. And so it's either we overhaul all the vet school curriculums, or we offer a parallel pathway that veterinary students can learn, and veterinarians can fill in the blanks from their education, because we have so many options beyond what you learned. We have so many ways to be better at what you do, and so many ways to love veterinary medicine again. And so the PRIMA care, we're looking for more accurate diagnoses, fear-free practice, cat-centered care, cat-friendly, less veterinary burnout, and just so multidisciplinary and so versatile and so stimulating intellectually and supportive emotionally. So that's the rundown there. We do offer a PRIMA PVM PRIMA program, say that 3 times fast, and a certificate for them, so that students, graduate students, interns, residents, and faculty are eligible to take it. So you can see, you get a sampling of what this is all about. And it's all online, except for the on-site labs if you're local in Fort Collins, or we can do a Zoom session from our facility, from our academy. And that's where you see the hands-on and you get some experience if you come down locally. And you learn the basics of all aspects of science-based integrated medicine and rehab. And so it's 12 hours per semester, and it's online with the ability to be on site. So as we start with the first year, what we're doing is coinciding with what you're learning in school. So starting with just general anatomy, acupuncture anatomy, and then in the spring, acupuncture neuroanatomy, and then we have photomedicine in there as well, because it will make such a difference. And this whole curriculum I had presented to CSU, and so if I hadn't left, we would be doing this by now within this institution. But I had some other things I wanted to get done, including the human teaching. But anyway, so this was going to be vertically and horizontally integrated into the curriculum, and it was approved by the curriculum committee. So that as you're learning anatomy, you understand, like, wait, that fascia you just put in the trash there, that was really important, because that's going to connect, the neck to the back to the shoulder and all the way to the tail. And here's why, and here's what you can do in the live animal when you are treating with acupuncture or massage or whatever it is. These structures are important, and here's why. And then in the second year, medical massage and botanical medicine. So when you're learning pharmacology, at least this was how the CSU curriculum was, that that it was designed to be there so that it's on your mind anyway, but it's just not drugs. It's all the other parts of medicine. And then clinic year, third year, orthopedic integrative rehab. So this is what is being left out. This is where, you heard about the TPLO today? Okay, that's fine. Here you're going to hear about some other things too. And so just to round out your education and make you a better doctor as you hit the ground running, when you get out of school and you start your own little practice or work with others, and don't get sucked into corporate medicine. And then the fourth year, you take medical acupuncture for veterinarians. If you're a practicing vet, then we have a pathway for you, and that is just with the big courses, and that is the certification. The certificate as a vet student is not the certification, but you do get acknowledged for having completed sort of that pre-PRIMA certification. But then it really starts in the full way when you take the medical acupuncture for veterinarians course. Okay? So if you have questions, feel free to email me about any curriculum or anything, or suggestions for more chiropractic webinars or anything. narda@curacore.org. If you just want general information, just info@curacore.org. And we will see you next time. Thanks for being here.